Do we turn on our video, or are you not prepared?
I can definitely turn on the video if
You wear pants?
you wouldn't see it anyway. Let me actually see how I can get back that little window to turn on my camera. Oh, nice, you're walking around.
Yep.
It should be casual Friday, and yet I'm in the office. Not very casual.
I think we will then start sharp, right? Like in a minute.
Yep, let's start in half a minute or so. Given that I'm only sharing one window, I can't really keep an eye on participant lists and everything else.
I'll take care of that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
There we go.
Okay. Let's get started. Hello and hi everyone. Thanks for joining or watching the recording of our session of running a SOC on Microsoft Solutions, where Alex and I are going to share our experiences on what it takes of running a SOC, build on those Microsoft solutions, what the challenges are, what the good things are, and what we believe is really important for running a successful SOC with Microsoft. A little bit about myself. I'm Michael, also known as Michael van Hybrid, for those who can't spell my or pronounce my last name. Currently manage the Collective Consulting company based out of Belgium, where we focus on all things Microsoft and Microsoft security. Been a long time MVP, a certified master, a certified ethical hacker, but basically means that I'm very passionate about security myself. And joined today by Alex. Alex, maybe you can.
Who's also passionate about security. Microsoft MVP for threat protection, and just 63 days ago, founded a new organization called the Next PISEC that is following a holistic security approach, running managed SOC, and yeah, also have a community called Trust and Tech Alone. It's kind of comparable to what everybody does on Meetup. So if you don't have stumbled over Trust and Tech yet, feel free to join us and follow up.
Cool. So before we get started, we do want to thank the sponsors for making an event like this possible. It's not just a 365 Microsoft Block, but also IT Point and ScriptRunner. It's always important to thank those sponsors. So if you have a moment, go and check out their offerings. Pretty sure it could be very interesting as well. So this being said, Alex, can you share a little bit on what you believe a modern SOC looks like?
Yeah, Michael and myself were brainstorming when we prepared this session, and I think it's quite common sense that having something like a state of the nation address in the beginning is a good way on how to start a presentation. And we were thinking that, the definition of a modern SOC quite fits well to what we want to land within this session. So we want to, of course, show a little, tell a little bit about our lessons learned and our experience that we had in the past 2 to 3 years on building a SOC, but also I think SOC is not equal to SOC definition in general, at least my or our definition of what it is. And I just said that 63 days ago, I founded a new organization that is, of course, tackling these topics as well, right? So we do have something called a managed device, which of course is corporate owned, person enabled. And here we are, right? A consulting organization that, of course, wants to enable productivity as much as possible to their employees. But on the other side, I mean, we all know that consultants do have some, specific requirements to their devices, and that I think represents quite well the overall situation in even corporate organizations. Let's generally speaking say organizations all over the world. Why this slide is up is because I thought that is really a good fit in showing people that, you know, modern and corporate device is of course not always going in the same direction. And the Facebook breach, that I think you all should be aware that 533 million Facebook user phone numbers got leaked, is impressive to me, because of course, I mean, if we hand out or give smartphones to people in our organization, and I personally have to say I'm owning just one phone, which is my personal phone and my company phone, I would, especially because of the sake of, you know, security, multi-factor authentication, of course, also enter this phone number in a service that asks me to. And Facebook is the Facebook breach does not have necessarily something to do with multi-factor authentication, but of course people use Facebook as a, you know, private platform to connect with people and share thoughts, pictures, impressions, whatever. And this got me thinking, you know, what's the correct split of locking your endpoint down to the very minimum so it is really just, you know, productivity enabled, or rather for organization like, uh, in my opinion, modern organizations say, I rather want everybody in my organization, my employees, even maybe their children when using homeschooling or whatever, use a device that is managed and monitored by a security operations center than a private device, right? And that is, of course, one question that I find quite interesting to discuss. And on the other side, I mean, we always have to know and have anything to understand, okay, if a person has a corporate device where it then gets, you know, notifications in that regard, in that scenario, we had something like just general phishing, but also there was a specific campaign that addressed Android devices. And when people clicked on the link that you guys can see here, a hidden app was installed, more or less sideloaded on an Android device, that then had access to the address book and sent out another round of SMS with fishy links to the people that are in the address book. And I think we all know, once an attack, you know, breaks the border between something that is coming from the internet to something that is coming from my daughter, my son, my mother, my father, somebody that I know, that I work with, especially from their, you know, phone that was given out by the organization, the accessibility or the risk that people click on that link is way higher than it is just one of these SMSs that you guys can see here. So this got me, or this got us into the discussion: how much control do we really have about information, or the identity, or the endpoint in general, that we give out, and how much fits into our definition of a modern SOC. On the next slide, I just, you know, brought one slide. This is a slide that I bring up quite often. It's not, you know, rocket science, but it shows that the whole progress of security operations, or operations in general, is something that you have to continuously look in. It always starts with incident detection, incident response, sometimes forensics. And what we also see is a lot value and a lot, importance in the area of data insights and reporting in general, right? So we, I mean, what did we do in the past years? I mean, everybody maybe that is in IT for more than 5 years maybe has worked somewhere with a solution like Nagios or System Center Operations Manager. And how did we manage these systems, right? We every time I did a project with that technology, I reached out to a customer and then we installed it and we let it run for 2 weeks and then we had a look what came up, right? I think that's how we did it in the past. And if you do it in the same way with security today, just, set up more sensors and activities and solutions over and over, and then just feed everything into your SIEM solution, you of course have a very valuable data pool. But if you do not do anything out of that, it doesn't really add any value to your SecOps process, and that's what I'm thinking. Also, I think we should really identify and filter which information we really want to review, and then, of course, the work actually just starts, right? With that information that we then have in that data pool, we should think about automation scenarios. We should about self-healing in a way. We should think about notification. We should think about continuous hardening or learning out of vulnerabilities and breaches that happened, and how we can improve our security posture in our environment in general to make this incident not happen again, right? And that, I think, for at least my personal opinion, is a modern approach of running a SOC, where we, of course, take solutions like we did in the past with these SIEM solutions that are absolutely valuable. I'm not saying anything against that, but the way of running it, the way of improving it continuously is, I think, the most valuable and critical point that we need to think of when running a security operations center, no matter of size, no matter of complexity, no matter of location, people, or whatever it is. All of that should be in our mindset when designing that solution, right? So that brings us into the needs of a SOC, and I think, Michael, we can go through the points that we have prepared here as well.
Sure. So to the point that Alex was just making, right? A SOC has different aspects, right? It's at least a modern SOC, in our opinion, has multiple multiple hats on. One of them is being able to, call it a detection or response service or an MDR service or whatever you want to call it. Be able to understand what's happening in the environment, but is able to adequately respond to that. And so, from a little bit deeper perspective or deeper technical perspective, there are a couple of things that are absolutely primordial, right? And it starts with comprehensive logging, right? Because based on data, you can detect what's happening. Now, data can have many different shapes and forms, but it's really important that the data is there. I'll share with you an example of very recent, something that shook up the community quite heavily was the Exchange Hafnium attacks. Where all of a sudden, from one day to another, the whole world seemed to be vulnerable and quite badly to one or the other attack, and organizations were left scrambling, trying to update their servers. Some of them weren't aware, which kind of is a testimony to what Alex was mentioning about, you need to have a process, not just to respond to things, but also to be able to detect what's happening and to make sure that you can do the patching all throughout that continuous improvement process. Now, the point I was trying to make is not so much that there has to be a process, but what we found is that a lot of the customers that were initially, I'm going to say, breached, or where the vulnerability was exploited, they asked us, well, can you do some lightweight investigation, some, call it forensics, to understand if anything happened. And to my own dismay, I noticed that the current state that we're in, and by us, I mean the world is in, is that a lot of organizations have little to no logging, right? No history of logging whatsoever. Most servers are even installed with a default 20 meg security log on the server, which means about 2 or 3 hours worth of data is going to be kept on the server, and then everything else is overwritten as new data comes in. From a security perspective, things like that is just horrible because it decreases your ability to figure out what was happening, where things were coming from, and so forth and so on. Now, that's just one example, but the idea is that you have to have that comprehensive logging. And luckily, systems like Microsoft 365 or solutions like M365 and Azure and, even Google and Amazon Cloud, they have lots of logging available, but, having it available is one thing. So you need to have the proper tools and systems and processes in place to be able to digest these logs, to easily comb through the logs, the hunting principle, where you can search for anomalies, for specific elements, where you can test your theories. Hunting itself, right? Although the action may be challenging and difficult to do for most, it's nothing more than creating a theory about, I believe this may have happened. Let me go and comb through my log files and search for evidence of this actually happening, or evidence of something not happening, right? The absence of a piece of evidence may be evidence in itself. So, but if you have that vast amount of data, you have to be able to correlate it somewhere, which is where SIEM solutions come in. But it's not just the ability to have a solution that can actually help you go through all that data, but from there, what do you do with it, right? You need to be able to actually respond the SOAR pieces. So that's from a technical perspective, how you deal with that. But when you take a look at the SOC, whether it's an internal SOC or you're running a SOC on behalf of customers, right, you need to have additional integrations and components that allow you to create that process that Alex was so adamant about, right? So you need to have easy access, but a secure, easy access to the different environments, which means that you need to have whatever solutions in place that allow you to do that in a secure way. For Azure, for instance, I love the principle of Azure Lighthouse, but not all solutions offer this. So you have to look at your environment, how you can do that. One of the challenges that we will be talking about later today is that when you run a SOC for multiple customers, you might actually have to log in multiple times a day for multiple customers, and that's just a burden. It takes time away from your analysts to actually do what they should be doing, is analyzing stuff, not waiting for logging in into a portal and so forth and so on. Again, the automation bits and pieces coming into play here really, really importantly. But you need a single pane of glass for incidents, ITSM tooling, case management, somewhere where you can actually follow up on the cases. And for better and worse, there's some lightweight case management inside M365 portal, inside of Microsoft solutions, inside Azure Sentinel, but it's by no means able to deal with the actual full-blown case management or escalation or service management capabilities you need, even if it's just from an SLA perspective. There's other things that you have to look at, but at the same time, you do not want to dismiss the value that the native solutions bring. So if you're going to use a third-party solution, ServiceNow, Jira, anything like that, you want a bidirectional synchronization between your ITSM tool and Azure Sentinel and the backend system, so that they somehow stay in sync, so that when I close an incident or an alert, that alert or incident is closed in the backend system as well. One of the most frustrating things as a customer or as a SOC engineer happening is that I close an incident, but I open up the portal and I see like hundreds of incidents still open, even though I know they've been closed. So there's something to be said about that as well. And then, the automation capabilities, as I just mentioned, are not just important, they are critical. I'm going to make a very bold statement, but when I speak about a modern SOC, I speak really about the SOC of today. Whenever I see a SOC running with people and just people looking at a screen, doing things over and over again, you can always throw more people at a problem, but it isn't scalable, first of all, but it isn't smart either, right? There are things that you need an analyst for, to reason over things and to have chats with other people, to build these theories and to go out and search for things. But technology is capable of dealing with vast amount of use cases and scenarios where the technology is faster and better at detecting certain things. So use it for what it's worth and make sure that you automate as much as you can, because that's the only way that you're going to survive the avalanche of alerts and data and information that's being thrown at you. So when we take a look at what the modern SOC or what the needs are, right? How does that look like in a Microsoft-centric world? And what you can see here is basically how we, from a very high level, of course, how we kind of build our SOC architecture and the tools and integrations that exist. So whether customer 1, 2, and 3 are actual customers or business units or environments, yeah, that doesn't really matter. But basically, we leverage Azure Sentinel as a central platform to aggregate log files from Office 365, Microsoft 365 Defender, cloud platforms, solutions, applications, and so forth and so on. And then each of these Azure Sentinel instances, if you will, they report back through Azure Lighthouse into the SOC Azure Sentinel. Now, again, that may be one and the same instance, could be separate instances, kind of depends on how you're built as an organization and so forth and so on. But the principle remains the same. And then from there, lots of integrations happen, right? The Azure Sentinel portal is synchronized with an ITSM backend tool where, basically your SOC analysts are waiting for assignments, right? Whenever a ticket or an alert or an incident comes in, they pick it up from the queue, they start working on it. And several things can happen, right? They first of all, try to get an impression of, what are we dealing with? Ideally, in the step between, the alert being synchronized from Azure Sentinel into your ITSM solution, in this case, for instance, Jira from Atlassian, you can do some enrichment, like get data from the IP addresses, from the entities, the username, the device, and so forth and so on, and present as much information as you can into the analyst. In return, they can take action, right? Launch an automation, isolate a device, search for more information, or they can start hunting through a plethora of tools. Again, it could be the investigations dashboard in Azure Sentinel. They can open up a Jupyter notebook. They can use whatever tool they prefer to actually go out and do their investigation of what's happening at this time. This may also include logging into the Defender portal to get parts of data, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but it could be one of the ways that you work. But ultimately, all these things kind of work together, whereby the automation layer, in our case, again, because it's Microsoft centric, is all done through logic apps that live in the SOC tenant, if you will, which again could be the same tenant as your own environment. But from there, it orchestrates parts of automation that may live at a customer tenant, that may live in the same tenant, that takes specific actions. Actions could be anything from, taking a device, isolating a device, gathering the log files, pushing out specific updates, doing certain things to remediate or to catch them, or not catch, contain the threat that we're currently working with. And it's a really, really, really important step, because you want to take away that manual action activities from the SOC analyst in the first place. So there's plenty of solutions and technology available to actually help you go through the things. And when we take a look at what that means from a Microsoft perspective, obviously we're thinking Defender, we're thinking Azure Defender, Microsoft 365 Defender, we're thinking the integration with Azure Sentinel and the ability to leverage everything in a standard way, right? Where we've got events, alerts, incidents, and where all of that is correlated across the border. And to me, when I'm asked, like, why are you such a big fan of Microsoft solutions, you Microsoft fanboy, it's not so much because I believe that other solutions are crap. I don't. I think there's plenty of really good security solutions out there, but it's the integration part. It's the quote unquote platform play. It's the fact that everything is correlatable to one another in such an easy way, and that the automated solutions, the AI that Microsoft provides in Defender, Azure, M365, and even Azure Sentinel does such a good job of taking away parts of the, not responsibility of the work from an analyst, that it just becomes a huge time saver and basically your best analyst that you are going to have in the team to help you do certain things. The fact that all the signals are shared and so forth and so on gives you that rich input that is, I'm going to say, primordial. Now, as Alex will be talking about, this is one aspect of running a SOC, right? There's plenty of other things, and there are certain things that you really have to remember, because a SOC is only more as efficient as it can be. But how do you know what is efficient? How do you understand? How do you know that you're protecting against the things that really matter? So maybe you can share a little bit of thoughts about that, Alex.
Yeah, maybe one point to what you just said. I fully agree, and I think we're 100% on one level when saying that the integration of the different tools, no matter which folk or which scope you're looking, endpoint, productivity, anything that you can imagine, that's most definitely one. And I also agree that it might also been even the biggest part, but also I think Microsoft is doing a really nice job in the part of innovation, right? I mean, they just 2 days ago bought another company after Cybex that brings IoT technology, IoT security technology into the stack. I think 2022 will be a lot about IoT and assets in general, because my personal experience here is that every time I talk to big suppliers, big providers, big, anything that 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 has anything IoT related or OT related, they are not even aware of their assets, right? So they know that they have a factory out there. They have several out there in the wild, but they have zero insights in what is happening. And I'm always saying, when talking about Azure Defender to these companies, I'm always saying, guys, keep in mind, right? So I mean, if one of your folks in, I don't know, marketing, F&A, IT, or wherever gets phished from somebody, from an attacker, from something that is automated or whatever it is, the barrier of phishing people is really a matter of time, right? It's a matter of time and how smart you do and build everything. But getting into a network in a network segmentation where the real value adding is happening, like the factory network where you have your machines running and going 24/7, the folks that are in that network, they know what to do, right? I mean, that's not the script kiddie that just stumbled over a Reddit post and thought, hey, that's fun, let me try that, right? And successfully fished somebody. That's rather the group of people that you do not want to have in your network. And my honest statement here is, um, without that integration and with that speed of threats that are changing, I'm just reading over and over the very nice blog from Microsoft about the research of Fafanio and how they automated that nowadays even. That I think is really impressive, and the integration, but also the commitment to innovation and the speed is also one of the points that I would bring up as one of the main advantages to competitors. And that also brings me to the next slide, where I really want to highlight. I honestly, I can tell you, I mean, we did a webinar this week on Wednesday about breach and attack simulation. I have to commit that I was even a bit disappointed that we just addressed so little, like a small group of people. And I'm always thinking, why is that the case? I really don't get it, because I'm like 100% convinced that breach and attack simulation is a necessary part in in a modern SOC, and let me tell you why that is. Because I talked about security operations center in the last 5 to 10 years, and I said, I mean, we just implemented that, right? We just brought out the sensors on the Windows 10 machines, or sorry, not Windows 10, the Windows machines. We installed Microsoft Monitoring Agent and let everything feed into SCOM or any other monitoring solution. But we never tested, right? And that's honestly, I mean, that's what we did. We got SCCM, and then we got new releases, and we got in there and clicked every box. We checked every tool item. We really want to understand what can I improve more and more and more. And the same is with security. I mean, I personally have to say that when I did SCOM, 5 years later, I moved, or within these 5 years, I moved into security, and then reached out to organizations if they're interested in threat protection solutions from Microsoft. And the true honest statement here is that I spoke to the exact same people before than later in security, and that's not how modern security can be, right? And breach and attack simulation, in my opinion, has really some major improvements, or brings some intelligence into an organization. And I would not ever wanna not have this information, because for example, what I see is that, for example, we brought in conditional access over and over and over again, right? I have different workshops with folks in my team running, where they use the what if tool, where they create large lists of Excel policies that they then execute in conditional access. As one example, if what happens, then let's pull up an MFA. And I 100% think that this is totally valuable and super. But on the other side, I really see how necessary it is to really prove if it works. And what Safebreach, as one of these vendors of breach and attack simulation, and I'm totally fine if you pick any other, what they do is they just build a framework where they pick up alerts that have been, or let's say attacks that have been obfuscated, that have been assigned to any APT group. They rebuild them, of course, without the harmful code, without the malicious stuff in it, and give you as an organization the experience of what would happen if that malware, if that ransomware, if that fileless attack would run in my environment. And that, I think, is a super important thing, because we in our SOC, we were able to, pick it up and say, okay, let's, for example, we're now in June, let's take data exfiltration. Let's, out of the list of 18,000 attacks that are in the Safebreach portfolio, for example, let's pick some, like 10, and let them go against the environment, see the results. Safebreach also, like other breach and attack simulations as well, they show you what has been missed, and you would be surprised how much is missed, what has been detected, what has been prevented, and then do it again. Like, think of what can we do to harden our environment because of the things that have been missed. Attack surface reduction, right? Exploit guard, all these really shiny and interesting things are super valuable and critical on that point. And that's the value. And then when you did it over and over again, you really learn how things would react and behave in your environment. And then it has one additional, I think, very valuable benefit, that is training of the SOC people. I'm always saying that if an analyst, and that's really an experienced thing, honestly speaking, if an analyst at the customer side sees an incident for the very first time, the chance is very high that this person decides something different than he or she would have done or decided when, when going through that incident over and over again. Because the tools, we all agree, are on a very professional level, but at the very end, they're still very generous, right? So that the alerts still say something like, okay, this file is blocked because it's malicious. But if you do not know where to look and what to identify to see if this file is malicious or no, how can you really decide correct in a way that you have the whole, threat and risk in scope and don't go the wrong path? And that's what I'm saying. With breach and attack simulation, you not only train your environment or train your algorithms and AI. You not only improve your security by identifying what has been missed, you also train your SOC guys on how to operationalize on all these alerts and incidents. And that, I think, is a very valuable point. And we, on the next slide, have put together some more points. I'm not, like I said, I'm not doing a marketing thing here. Just want to, bring up two things that I find interesting. In the upper left corner, measure efficiencies of current controls that I think I have covered quite intensely, and also threat-specific visibility and preparedness, I think, is something that also, is quite interesting, because Safebreach, of course, like any other breach and attack simulation as well, not only has stuff that is in there, on the other side, fits to your Defender stack, right? No matter if it's really Microsoft Defender or any other security solution, it also is a little bit out of the box. It also is very innovative and really sophisticated sometimes. So you can even identify things that are not addressed in a way, like, for example, things that you would not ever have thought of, like, for example, communication or exfiltration through Teams or any other, SaaS solution that is out there. So that, I think, is really adding value.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the key things as well is like right in the middle, enhanced pen testing and red team operations. One of the things that I truly believe in is the SOC where you outsource security and as a company and you don't look after it anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. Like that model is dead in the water. It has to be collaboratively, right? You can outsource parts of experiences, you can or knowledge, but the business context, the smarts about your organization remains within your organization, and you have to collaborate together. You have to not only do it on the defensive side, but also on the offensive side. So these purple team exercises where red and blue meet one another are super important, right? For two reasons. First of all, it allows you to understand where your monitoring gaps are, where your protection gaps are, or even your response gaps are, but it also keeps your blue team in check, right? It challenges them to always go one step further in that continuous process. Now, the challenge with traditional pen testing exercises or traditional purple team exercises, which they still have value, is that they're non-standardized. It really depends on the person at the other side of the table performing the red team exercise on whether or not you'll have a successful test, right? And
Yep.
successful doesn't necessarily mean you've been breached, because at the end of the day, you're always going to be breached. It's always possible, assume breach principle, but it's more the what if that person was really great on Active Directory, but not so great on Azure Active Directory, and you're a full Azure AD customer? Well, then your exercise was just a little bit less valuable. And sure, you can go into a leg up scenario and another leg up scenario and give them all the insights and all the accesses and all the passwords they need to move laterally across the organization. But at that point in time, it just loses its value, which you don't have with these automated breach and attack simulation tools, because they do predictable things. They're in a safe way, but they do it continuously, which also allows you to, trust but control, verify what your defenders, your blue team is doing, whether they're doing it right, help them understand if they're not doing it right, and continuously improve in that way. And I think that, along with the points that Alex was mentioning, is just super critically important. So this said, there's a couple of scenarios. Not sure why this is grayed out a little bit, but In the Microsoft stack, and I don't want to lose too much time talking about the specificalities here, right? The Azure Sentinel dashboard you can see, but these are just the testimonies to how that integration again is working together, how Office 365, Defender 365 is working together to bring information to you so that it becomes much more or much easier for your SOC analyst to understand the context of an incident, and then allows you to take a decision, or more easily take an informed decision, I should say, on how you should proceed and contain, evict, and restore from such an incident as well. So what you can see here is that the ordered timeline where you know that a suspicious email pattern was detected, and Office 365 already took actions. Merely 2 minutes after the initial emails were being sent out, the Office 365 platform said, something's is off. And so they cut off the ability to send out messages from your tenant, alert based on that, and provide that information directly to you. Even more so that when you investigate an alert like this, what you can see is that the messages that were being sent contain a URL. There's a screenshot of the URL. So basically, all the things that I, as an analyst, am interested in figuring out whether or not this was malicious is available to me at my fingertips. Now, do not underestimate the power of all of this, right? You could say, well, great, there's a screenshot in there, but it saves time, and time is of the essence, especially when you're under attack or when you're dealing with stuff, things that you don't have to do, those could be critical, quote unquote, minutes. In light of, sometimes being breached for 2 years and not knowing it, a minute or two won't make a difference. That I agree with. But what we're talking about here is the avalanche of things that you see on a daily basis. And make no mistakes, right? These types of attacks, they are super common, right? They're almost the script kiddies that launch them on a daily basis. But it's here that a lot of the risk lies, because these low-key attacks are so successful, so generally successful, that you really have to watch out for these, because the really bad bad ones, the bad hacks where someone is like with a hoodie coding trying to get into your network, really knows what they're doing, sure, they happen all the time, but not as frequent as these do. And in terms of exposure, make sure that you cover your bases as well. Another one that I wanted to talk about is the complexity of things that you're dealing with, right? What you can see here is one of phishing attempt, where an attachment was sent to, or actually an email with a link to a website was sent. That website made you download an HTA file. When you open up that HTA file, it contained something that looks like this, which is an invite for an event that looks genuinely okay. I mean, the pages look the same, but obviously you and I, because we work in IT, we know it would never be consumed through an HTA file. But users generally don't know, and they think this looks genuine. And in the back, code's running, is doing stuff on your endpoint, and before you know it, you've got a breached endpoint, which is now inside your network, with access to your crown jewels, if you will, and bad things can happen. Now, again, this is where things come into play. But what I want to highlight here is that it can be really challenging as well, because what you can see here is the alert that says we've blocked the 807 behavior, right? We've blocked the malware from doing something. Sure, they've blocked that one specific action that was taking place at that certain time. But I can assure you, right, if you now dismiss this alert and just close it, there's still a C2 running. Because what it didn't tell you, this alert, is that the C2 was established before it ran this command, and then the subsequent commands were actually brought into it, but the C2 was still running on that device. So even though this is a low informational or event, so not a highly critical one, it requires further investigation to make sure that nothing else is running on that device as well. Now, luckily, technology is available for you to help and figure that out. But again, if you've never encountered a situation like this, how would you know that this isn't sufficient to keep you safe, and that you actually have to go hunt for, or not hunt, but investigate more on the endpoint itself to understand what was happening there? Now, the quick intro here for us was more to talk a little bit about the challenges, call it the ugly sides, if you will, of running a SOC on Microsoft solutions. It's not so much about the quality, it's more about the grievances we have, like, when you're dealing with multiple tenants, whether it's multiple customers or just multiple tenants in your environments, just be prepared that you'll have to log on to different tenants on a daily basis, and then therefore you will lose time. Previously, it was less of an issue, but Microsoft has made a couple of changes to how you log on through the M365 security portal, and yeah, it just means a little bit loss of time. I wish it was different. I know that, Lighthouse for M365 would be a great addition if it worked in the same way, but it currently is what it is. So how we deal with it is using multiple browsers or profiles in browsers where we then log into, allowing us to easily switch between environments, but that's not greatly ideal either. The lack of a unified or universal RBAC model, same thing, right? How you do RBAC in Azure isn't the same how you do it in M365. And then how you do it in M365 isn't the same how you do it in Cloud App Security. And so there's still a long way to go there, which means that you have too much permissions. Like one of the things that stumbles me is the search and purge capability to go out and search manually, well, through the tools in the mailboxes. That's a really, 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 invasive permission. It allows me to basically go in and search in your emails. Now, a SOC needs that permission to go out and search for mails and remove them if they're illegitimate or malicious. But that's a role that's through the SEC or the compliance center, if you will, and there's no privileged identity management whatsoever. So it's permanently assigned or not. Things like that just get to me. Is it a big problem? No, but it's just unfortunate that we don't have the granularity that we would love to have in for instance, these solutions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And also the I think the raw data, right? So we just yesterday we had a chat in a closed group. I'm just posting the link in here that Microsoft announced finally that the Microsoft 365 Defender Stream API is public preview. So just posted that link into the chat. But what we want to point out here as well is the the gap of having all data in every Microsoft solution, even, right? Unfortunately, that is the case that it's not guaranteed that although it's a Microsoft solution, the exchange or the exfiltration in and out of data of the tools is a given fact. Microsoft is working hard on this because they see that especially in more heterogeneous environments, this is a killer, right? So for example, if you have workloads in Microsoft Defender and use, for example, a SIEM solution, Curator, Splunk, you name it, it is super tough to get all the information from Microsoft out into the SIEM solution. And also and I think that's the direction where Microsoft is heading, I think, is to push them back in, right? So for example, if you have something identified on your endpoint and you think it's worthwhile to isolate that machine, why isn't it possible to check a box in your Splunk, Curator, whatever solution, and then it automatically gets done in the workflow, right? And that said, I mean, we went through automation in that session over and over is a crucial point.
Yep, which is absolutely what you just mentioned, right? The lack of full API support or the lack of full, cross solution crossing, capabilities is hurting as well. Now you have to deal with the limitations you get. And it's not so much a Microsoft problem. All other solutions have their limitations. It's just unfortunate that sometimes some really important stuff are missing. Like, I believe the live response API, it's kind of the same thing, right? Which, depending on how you want to automate certain things, it would be great to have things like that available. Or the Defender for Office 365 phishing API, lack of automated investigation or responses that you can't trigger them. It's unfortunate. It's not unsurmountable. It's just something that is missing. But at the end of the day, what you also have to be very aware of is cutting through the noise. It's kind of the discussion data versus more data versus less data. The more data you have, the more noise there is, the harder it is to cut through the noise. So there is a thin line to walk between getting too much information and getting what is right enough. Like discussions we have regularly is Defender for Endpoint enough, or do you also need Sysmon running on those machines to have more visibility? And what does it bring to you versus, does it solve certain challenges, or is it just going to bring more noise? And how are you going to deal with that? And do you have the experiences and so forth and so on? And then add Defender for Office 365. That is pretty chatty on itself. Identity protection, which God is great, but is so chatty. It just means that you'll have to figure out a way on how to cut through the noise, which, by the way, is very different for each environment.
Yeah, we
So
just implemented that solution with the customer where we went through all the alerts, for example, in MDI that are possible, and decided if this is a valuable alert for us or no, and then once having that, we enabled the integration with the SIEM solution, right? So that's also a feasible way of implementing things.
Yep. One thing is sure is that a SOC is more than just detecting alerts or things that are happening. It's an end-to-end approach to making sure that you can, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from all the threats that are relevant to your environment. So they really cover all the phases of the NIST cybersecurity framework, and they should definitely do that, not focus on one or the other aspect. And I think that end-to-end security story and how to deal with that is super important. Now, this being said, we're already over time, so I think we're going to wrap it up here. Really appreciate you joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Alex, thank you again. I really enjoyed presenting with you and your insights. Always a pleasure.
Same here, likewise. And thanks to the sponsors, which we have again on the next slide, for supporting this conference. And yeah, stay in touch with us. We're super open for any discussion in Teams, Twitter, LinkedIn, name any social tool. Yeah,
Signal
and
and
have a great
whatnot.
conference. Yeah, exactly. Take care,
Enjoy the
guys.
rest of your day. Cheers,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.